Billionaire pretended to be asleep under a tree. Then the maid's toddler girl curled up on his chest. Ethan Cole was 34 years old, and he owned more money than most people could count in a lifetime. He had 3 companies, a private jet, and a mansion so big that even he sometimes got lost in it. But none of that mattered on this particular afternoon, because Ethan was tired. Not sleepy tired. Tired in his soul. He walked out to the old oak tree at the edge of his property, the one his father used to sit under before he passed away. Ethan lay down on the soft grass beneath its branches, closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. He did this sometimes. It was the only way he knew how to make the world leave him alone. If his assistant thought he was napping, she wouldn't bring him more papers to sign. If his mother called about another business dinner, he could say he never heard the phone. Pretending to sleep was Ethan's secret escape from a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty on the inside. He had been engaged once 3 years ago. Her name was Vanessa, and she had loved his money more than she loved him. When she left, Ethan built a wall around his heart so thick that nobody had been able to get past it since. He worked. He signed contracts. He shook hands with important people. But he had stopped truly living. That morning, his housekeeper, a kind woman named Maria, had come to work with her daughter because the babysitter had cancelled last minute. Maria was a single mother. Her husband had left when their daughter was just a baby, and now it was only the 2 of them against the world. Maria worked long hours cleaning Ethan's enormous house, and she was always terrified that if her boss found out she had brought her daughter to work, she would lose her job. She needed this job. It paid for diapers, for daycare, for the small apartment she and her daughter shared across town. The little girl's name was Lily. She was 3 years old, with curly brown hair and eyes the color of warm honey. She had a laugh that sounded like tiny bells, and she was curious about absolutely everything. While her mother dusted shelves and mopped floors inside the mansion, Lily had wandered out through an open door and into the garden, chasing a butterfly that danced just out of her reach. She ran across the lawn in her little yellow sundress, giggling, until the butterfly disappeared over a hedge. That's when she noticed the big tree. And under the big tree, she noticed a man lying very still. Lily tilted her head, the way small children do when they see something they don't quite understand. She walked closer, her bare feet padding softly on the grass. She had never seen this man before. He looked tired but not scary. His face was soft in his sleep, none of the sharpness she might have felt from a stranger. Something about him made her feel safe. Ethan heard the small footsteps but didn't open his eyes. He assumed it was a bird or maybe the wind moving a branch. He kept his breathing slow and steady, fully committed to his fake nap. Then he felt something impossibly small and warm settle onto his chest. His eyes snapped open in surprise, and there she was. A tiny girl, curled up right on top of him like he was a pillow, her small hand resting near his heart, her curly hair tickling his chin. She looked up at him with big brown eyes and smiled the sweetest, most trusting smile he had ever seen. "Hi," she said simply, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Ethan didn't know what to do. He was a man used to boardrooms and business deals, not toddlers climbing onto his chest in the middle of the afternoon. But something about the weight of her, so light and so trusting, made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Hello there," he said softly, his voice gentle so he wouldn't scare her. "You sleeping?" Lily asked, patting his shirt with her tiny hand. "I was pretending," Ethan admitted, surprising himself with his own honesty. He never told anyone the truth about his fake naps. But somehow, telling this truth to a 3-year-old felt easy. "Why pretend?" Lily asked, her head tilting again. Ethan opened his mouth to give some grown-up excuse, but nothing came out. He looked at this little girl, so unafraid, so unaware of who he was or how much money he had or how many people wanted things from him. To her, he was just a nice tree-shaped pillow to nap on. "I don't really know," he finally said, and for the first time in a long time it felt true. Just then, panicked footsteps came rushing across the lawn. "Lily! Lily, baby, where are you?" Maria came around the hedge, her face pale with worry, until she saw her daughter curled up on the chest of her employer, one of the richest men in the state. Her heart dropped into her stomach. "Oh my goodness, sir, I am so sorry," Maria gasped, rushing forward to scoop Lily into her arms. "She must have wandered outside. I only looked away for 1 second, please. I need this job. I'll make sure it never happens again." Ethan sat up slowly, brushing grass off his shirt, watching the fear in this woman's eyes. He recognized that fear. It was the fear of losing everything over one small mistake. "Wait," Ethan said gently, standing up. "Please don't apologize." Maria froze, still holding Lily tightly, bracing herself for bad news. Ethan looked at the little girl in her mother's arms, then back at Maria's tired, frightened face, and something inside him, something that had been closed for a very long time, quietly began to open. "You're not in trouble," Ethan said again, more firmly this time, seeing that Maria still didn't quite believe him. "I promise you that." Maria's shoulders relaxed only slightly. She had heard promises from wealthy employers before, promises that changed the moment something inconvenient happened. She held Lily a little closer, as if her daughter's small body could shield her from disappointment. "She's usually very good," Maria said quickly. "She doesn't normally wander off. The babysitter canceled this morning and I didn't have anyone else, and I know I should have asked permission first, but I was afraid you'd say no, and I really needed the hours today." "Maria," Ethan said, and she stopped talking, surprised that he knew her name. Of course he knew her name. She had worked in his home for almost a year, quietly cleaning, quietly existing in the background of his enormous life, and he had barely noticed her as a person until this very moment. "It's fine," he said again. "Really?" Lily, unbothered by the tension between the two adults, reached her small arms out toward Ethan again. "Down," she said, wiggling in her mother's arms, wanting to get back to the grass, or perhaps back to the strange, nice man who let her nap on him. Maria hesitated, glancing at Ethan as if asking permission, and he gave a small nod. She set Lily down, and the little girl immediately toddled back toward Ethan, grabbing a fistful of his pants leg for balance, looking up at him with total confidence that he would not mind. Ethan looked down at her, and something about the innocent way she held on to him, expecting nothing, wanting nothing but a moment of company, made his throat feel tight. "How old is she?" he asked. 3, Maria said softly. "Her birthday was in March." "She's beautiful," Ethan said, and he meant it in the simplest way, not as a compliment to impress anyone, but as a plain observation of a genuinely happy, curious little person. Maria's eyes softened for the first time. "Thank you. She's my whole world." Ethan crouched down so he was closer to Lily's height. She giggled and reached up to touch his face, patting his cheek the way toddlers do, testing the world with their hands before they trust it with their hearts. Ethan let her. He didn't flinch or pull away, though it had been years since anyone touched him with such simple, uncomplicated affection. Every touch he received these days came with a motive attached: a business deal, a photo for the newspapers, a woman hoping to marry his money. This was different. This was just a little girl who liked his face. "You're funny," Lily announced, patting his nose now. "Am I?" Ethan asked, smiling despite himself, a real smile, not the practiced one he used for cameras and shareholders. "Yeah," Lily said, as if this settled the matter completely. Maria watched the exchange with a strange mixture of relief and worry. Relief that her daughter hadn't caused a disaster. Worry that this was somehow too good to be true, that a man like Ethan Cole, busy and important and surrounded by wealth she could never imagine, would eventually grow tired of the interruption and send them both away. "I should get her back inside," Maria said. I still have the West Wing to finish before 5. Maria, Ethan said, standing up again. How long have you worked here? Almost a year, sir. Please don't call me sir, he said, though he wasn't sure why it bothered him so much today when it never had before. Ethan is fine. Maria blinked, clearly uncomfortable with the informality. In her experience, employers who told you to call them by their first name were usually the ones who wanted something from you later. She nodded anyway, not wanting to argue. Do you have someone to watch her regularly? Ethan asked. For when you're working. Maria's jaw tightened slightly. This was the question she dreaded most, the one that exposed how fragile her life really was. I have a daycare, but it's expensive, and some days like today things fall apart. I don't have family nearby. It's just us. Ethan looked at Lily again, who had now abandoned both adults entirely and was crouched in the grass, examining an ant with the intense focus only a toddler could manage. There's a room in the East Wing, Ethan said slowly, an idea forming even as he spoke it aloud. It used to be a playroom back when my sister and I were young. Nobody uses it anymore. If it would help, Lily could stay there while you work. It's safer than her wandering the grounds, and it might ease your mind. Maria stared at him, stunned. Sir Ethan, I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking, he said simply. I'm offering. Tears unexpectedly filled Maria's eyes, and she looked away quickly, embarrassed. It had been so long since anyone had offered her help without expecting something back. She was used to fighting alone, budgeting alone, worrying alone. The kindness of a stranger, especially one as powerful as Ethan Cole, felt almost too big to accept. Why would you do that? She asked quietly. You don't even know us. Ethan looked down at Lily again, who had abandoned the ant and was now attempting to pick a dandelion, blowing the white fluff into the air with a delighted squeal, completely unaware that she had just changed something inside a man who thought his heart had gone permanently numb. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But for the first time in a long time I felt something today. I'd like to feel it again. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He normally dreaded mornings, the endless emails waiting on his phone, the long list of decisions that needed his signature before noon. But today there was something different pulling him out of bed. He wanted to see if the playroom idea had actually happened, if Maria had trusted him enough to bring Lily back. He walked through the quiet halls of his enormous house, past paintings worth more than most people's homes, past rooms that were cleaned every day but rarely entered by anyone. He reached the East Wing and pushed open the door to the old playroom. Dust had been wiped from the shelves. Sunlight poured through tall windows onto a rug that used to have his childhood toys scattered across it. In the corner sat a few boxes his staff had quickly filled overnight, at his request, with soft blankets, picture books, and a handful of toys purchased in a rush from a store nobody on his staff had ever visited before. And there, in the middle of the room, sat Lily, stacking wooden blocks with the seriousness of a tiny architect. Ethan! She shouted the moment she saw him, mispronouncing his name slightly, more like E-Fun, and scrambling to her feet to run toward him. Something about hearing his name from her, without any title, any respect owed to his wealth, just pure joyful recognition, hit him harder than any business win ever had. Hey there, he said, crouching down to catch her as she barreled into his legs. Maria appeared in the doorway, holding a laundry basket, looking uncertain. I hope this is all right. I didn't want to overstep. It's more than all right, Ethan said, watching Lily return to her block tower. This room hasn't had this much life in it since I was a kid. Maria studied him for a moment. There was something in the way he watched her daughter, something almost hungry, like a man remembering what happiness used to feel like. You had a happy childhood here, she asked carefully. Ethan's face changed slightly. Some of it. My father built this house from nothing. He used to sit with me right here on this rug before everything got complicated. before the company grew so big that he stopped having time for anything but boardrooms. What happened to him? Maria asked gently. He passed away 6 years ago. Heart attack in his office at his desk, working late on a Friday night. Ethan looked down at his hands. I promised myself I wouldn't end up the same way. And somehow I still did. Maria didn't say anything right away. She simply set the laundry basket down and sat on the edge of the rug, near enough to be respectful of the distance between them, but close enough that the conversation could continue if he wanted it to. You still have time to change that, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the simple honesty of the statement. Most people around him spoke carefully, calculating every word for how it might affect their standing with him. Maria spoke like someone who had nothing to lose and nothing to gain, only truth to offer. I've been thinking about that a lot since yesterday, he admitted. Lily, uninterested in grown-up conversation, toddled over with a wooden block extended toward Ethan like an offering. Build, she instructed. Yes, ma'am, Ethan said, taking the block obediently, and Maria laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even her. For the next hour, Ethan sat on the floor of his childhood playroom, building a wobbly tower of blocks with a 3-year-old who had no idea he was one of the wealthiest men in the country. Every time the tower fell, Lily shrieked with laughter instead of frustration, and every time Ethan found himself laughing too, a sound that felt rusty from disuse but wonderful all the same. Maria eventually excused herself to finish her chores, glancing back at the doorway more than once, watching her daughter and her employer with a look on her face that was hard to name. Something between disbelief and hope. Over the following days, this became a pattern. Ethan would find reasons to walk past the East Wing. He'd find reasons to postpone a meeting by 10 minutes. Just enough time to peek into the playroom and see what Lily was doing. His assistant noticed the change first, the way he seemed lighter, less sharp with the staff, more patient during long calls. You've been different lately, his assistant, a woman named Priya, commented one afternoon. Have I? Ethan asked, though he already suspected the answer. You smiled at the janitor this morning. You never smile at anyone before 10. Ethan didn't explain. He wasn't entirely sure how to explain it himself. All he knew was that a little girl with honey-colored eyes had climbed onto his chest under a tree and somehow, without meaning to, had begun rebuilding something inside him that he thought was gone for good. But not everyone in Ethan's life was pleased with the change. His mother, a sharp, image-conscious woman named Diane Cole, heard rumors from the staff about her son spending his afternoons in the old playroom with the housekeeper's daughter, and she was not amused. Diane Cole arrived at the mansion on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced, the way she always did when she wanted to catch her son off guard. She found him in the garden, sitting under the old oak tree, with Lily asleep against his chest and Maria sitting nearby folding a small stack of laundry she had brought outside to finish while keeping an eye on her daughter. Ethan, Diane said sharply, her heels clicking against the stone path. A word, please. Ethan carefully shifted Lily off his chest and laid her gently on a soft blanket beside him before standing to greet his mother. Maria immediately rose too, sensing the tension, gathering the laundry basket as if preparing to disappear. You can stay, Maria, Ethan said quietly, but Maria shook her head and quickly excused herself, taking the basket and retreating toward the house, though she cast one worried glance back at her sleeping daughter. What exactly is going on here? Diane demanded once Maria was out of earshot. The staff tells me you've turned the East Wing into a nursery. That you spend your afternoons playing with the housekeeper's child instead of running your company. Her name is Lily, Ethan said evenly. And I still run my company. I've simply stopped pretending that work is the only thing that matters. Do you understand how this looks? Diane pressed, lowering her voice though there was no one nearby to hear. People will talk. They'll say you're involved with the help. They'll question your judgment, your priorities, everything your father built. My father, Ethan interrupted, his voice sharper than he intended, worked himself into an early grave and missed most of my childhood because he was too busy protecting the company's image. I'm not going to make the same mistake. Diane's face tightened. Your father built an empire. And it cost him everything that actually mattered, Ethan said. I'm not letting that happen to me. So what, you're going to play house with the maid and her daughter? Is that the plan now? Diane's tone turned cold. You could have any woman in this city, Ethan. Women with families, connections, women who understand what it means to run in these circles. Instead, you're wasting your time on a single mother who cleans your bathrooms. Something in Ethan snapped quietly, not loudly, but firmly. Don't speak about her that way. Diane blinked, taken aback by the steel in her son's voice. Maria works harder than anyone I have ever met, Ethan continued. She raises her daughter alone, with no family nearby, no safety net, nothing but her own determination. And she still shows up every single day with kindness in her heart despite everything life has thrown at her. That is not something to look down on. That is something to admire. Ethan. I'm not finished, he said, and Diane, surprised, actually stopped talking. For 6 years since Dad died, I've been running on autopilot. Signing papers. Shaking hands. Pretending to nap under this tree because it's the only place I can escape the pressure of being Ethan Cole, businessman. And then a 3-year-old climbed onto my chest and looked at me like I was just a person, not a bank account, not a name on a building, just a person. And for the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to actually be happy. Diane was quiet for a long moment, studying her son's face, seeing something there she hadn't seen since before her husband passed away. I'm not saying I have feelings for Maria, Ethan added more gently now. I barely know her. But I know that her daughter has cracked something open in me that I thought was sealed shut forever, and I am not going to apologize for wanting more of that feeling in my life. Diane sighed, some of the sharpness draining from her posture. She looked toward the house where Maria had disappeared, and then back at the little girl sleeping peacefully on the blanket beneath the tree. Her tiny chest rising and falling steadily, utterly unaware of the storm she had unknowingly caused. Your father used to bring you out to this tree, Diane said quietly, her voice softer now, almost sad. Did you know that? Before the company got too big. Before everything changed. He'd sit right here with you on his chest, just like that little girl was doing with you. Ethan's throat tightened unexpectedly. I didn't know that. You were too young to remember, Diane said. But I remember. I used to watch you both from the kitchen window and think it was the happiest I ever saw him. She paused, her eyes glistening slightly, an emotion Ethan rarely saw in his composed mother. And then the company grew, and the tree got quiet, and I lost him to boardrooms long before I lost him for real. Ethan looked down at Lily, still peacefully asleep, and understanding settled over him slowly. You're afraid I'll lose myself the same way he did. I'm afraid, Diane admitted, that you already have, and I didn't know how to bring you back. They stood together in silence for a moment, mother and son, under the same tree that had witnessed so much of their family's history, joy and loss intertwined in its roots. Maybe, Ethan said slowly, this is how I come back. Weeks passed, and the mansion slowly began to feel different, warmer somehow, as though the old walls had been holding their breath for years and were finally allowed to exhale. Lily's laughter echoed through hallways that used to only carry the sound of Ethan's footsteps and quiet business calls. The East Wing playroom overflowed with books and toys, and Maria found herself lingering longer in conversations with Ethan, no longer flinching at kindness, slowly learning to trust that it wasn't a trick. Ethan still ran his company. He still signed contracts and attended meetings and made difficult decisions that affected thousands of employees. But he no longer ate dinner alone in a dining room built for 20 people. Most evenings now, he found himself in the kitchen, at Maria's insistence at first, and then simply because he wanted to be, sharing a simple meal with her and Lily, listening to a 3-year-old explain, in great and passionate detail, why the color purple was superior to every other color in existence. One late afternoon, months after that first day under the oak tree, Ethan found himself back in that same spot, lying in the grass, this time not pretending to sleep, but genuinely resting. His eyes closed, sunlight warm on his face. Maria sat beside him this time, not folding laundry, not working, just sitting, something she never allowed herself to do during work hours until Ethan had gently insisted that some afternoons, she simply take a break and enjoy the sunshine with her daughter. Lily ran circles around the tree trunk, chasing another butterfly. Her laughter ringing out across the lawn exactly as it had that very first day. "Do you remember," Ethan said, eyes still closed, "the first time she found me here? I remember running across this lawn terrified I was about to lose my job," Maria said, smiling faintly at the memory. "I remember feeling her curl up on my chest and thinking for 1 second that maybe the world wasn't as heavy as I always believed it was," Ethan said. Maria looked over at him, her expression soft. "She changed something in you." "She changed everything," Ethan admitted, opening his eyes now to look at her. "And so did you, though it took me longer to understand that part." Maria's cheeks warmed slightly, and she looked away, unsure how to respond to the quiet honesty in his voice. In the months since that first day, something had grown slowly between them, careful and unspoken, built not on grand gestures but on small moments. Shared meals, quiet conversations, the comfortable silence of two people who no longer felt the need to perform for each other. "I used to think," Maria said softly, "that people like you didn't really see people like me. That we were just part of the furniture. Useful but invisible. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you," Ethan said sincerely. "Both of you." Lily, tired from her butterfly chase, wandered back over and flopped down onto the blanket between them, immediately climbing onto Ethan's chest exactly the way she had that very first day, as though it were her rightful place in the world. "Comfy," she announced, closing her eyes with the total contentment only small children seem to possess. Ethan wrapped his arm gently around her, feeling the same warmth spread through his chest that he had felt months ago, except now it was joined by something else, something steadier, something that felt like the beginning of a real family rather than a fleeting, unexpected comfort. "Maria," he said quietly, watching Lily drift toward sleep on his chest, "I know this is unconventional. I know the world will have opinions about a man like me and a woman like you. But I don't care about any of that anymore. What I care about is this feeling right here under this tree, and I don't want it to end when the sun goes down." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of fear or worry. "Ethan, I never expected any of this. I was just trying to keep my daughter safe and keep my job." "I know," he said gently. "That's exactly why I trust it. None of this was calculated. None of it was about my money or my name. It just happened the way real things do." Maria reached over and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his above her sleeping daughter's back. "Then let's see where it goes," she said softly. "Together." Above them, the old oak tree swayed gently in the breeze, its branches casting dappled shadows over the small, unlikely family gathered beneath it. It was the same tree where Ethan's father once held him as a boy, the same tree where Ethan had hidden from a world that expected too much of him, and now it had become the place where he finally allowed himself to be found. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, her small hand curling into the fabric of Ethan's shirt, right over his heart, just as it had that very first day. And Ethan, feeling that same small weight settle against his chest, understood now that some of the most powerful moments in life do not come from boardrooms or business deals or empires built from nothing. Sometimes, the biggest changes in a person's life begin with something as small and simple as a toddler's trust, a mother's quiet strength, and an old tree that had been waiting patiently for someone to come home.